And we're back in the car on a Monday, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Monday afternoon here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Sorry, my opening is maybe not as spirited as usual. This is another somewhat somber episode because today is, it would have been Robin Williams' 74th birthday. Robin has been gone almost 11 years. He passed in August 2014. And not every celebrity death hits the same, whether or not you consider yourself a big fan of the person in question. The guy on this t-shirt who passed in June of 2016, that's the celebrity death that hit me the hardest. I was inconsolable for close to a week. It felt like I'd lost a family member, even though I was only in the same room as Muhammad Ali one time at WrestleMania 1. He was about 250 feet away from me. Mom got incredible seats thanks to my cousin Ira, but it felt like I knew him. What can I tell you? Robin Williams' death came as a complete shock, unlike Ali, whose health unfortunately had been pretty terrible for the last couple of decades of his life. And Robin Williams, we didn't know that he was struggling with a neurological condition known as Lewy body dementia, kind of like Parkinson's, which is what Ali had, but not the same, and unfortunately even more pernicious than Parkinson's. Parkinson's will certainly rob you of years and will rob you of life to your years, but you can live in a limited capacity for a very long time. In the case of Ali, he had Parkinson's for more than 3 decades. And he was 74 when he passed before his time, but it's not like he didn't live a full life. He lived enough full lives for another, 10 people. But when the word came across that he was gone, there was a shock, there was a devastation, and then as we learned that he took his own life probably because he couldn't and didn't want to continue deteriorating, I was devastated. I was crushed. And it's not like I loved every Robin Williams film or was the biggest fan of his stand-up necessarily, but there was something different about Robin Williams. It wasn't just that he was funny. It was that he was a live wire and that he seemed to be creating in real time. He was somebody who would go on talk shows, and there's a lot of great clips of him with, like the younger Jay Leno and David Letterman, Johnny Carson, who he adored and who adored him, where he would go on and he would create 5 to 10 minutes of new material while he was sitting there on the couch. And there were very few people, and yes, Jim Carrey, Robin was a big fan of Jim. Jim to this day says, yeah, Robin always called me Maestro. He said he always called me Maestro, and that is about the highest praise that I've ever gotten. That's what Jim Carrey would say. But Robin he not only had an ability to create in real time, to ad-lib, and to encourage his co-stars to ad-lib with him. You never know, as they say, when you're going to catch lightning in a bottle. But he had an innate likability and a warmth that he just engendered in the audience. And that's why in his kind of later era, when he began playing more complicated characters, more heel characters, because he did play a lot. I understand he didn't look like a conventional leading man. Robin Williams was not Redford or Beatty or Jack Nicholson. He was closer to a Dustin Hoffman kind of a leading man. But in his later era, in films such as Christopher Nolan's Insomnia, a movie I don't really like, I gotta tell you, I think and this is high praise for Christopher Nolan, I think it's the worst film of his that I've seen. It's 3 to 3.5 stars out of 4. Christopher Nolan hasn't missed. The guy is a fucking genius. He's like a Kubrick. I would say that he's the closest thing to Kubrick working today in terms of his craftsmanship. But in Insomnia, opposite Al Pacino, Martin Donovan, Hilary Swank, Williams does something that, for people who hadn't seen 1 Hour Photo, he'd never done before. He crafts a 3-dimensional, horrendous villain who you still somehow get, I kind of understand why this guy is doing A, B, and C. Now, his most underrated great performance and underrated great film, which most people haven't seen. I might have to do an episode on it on its own, is the film called 1 Hour Photo. This was my father's. It was certainly in his top 3 favorite Robin Williams films. It is an incredible movie and a phenomenal performance by Robin, where he basically, in the kind of last days of where there were photo developing labs that got heavy use, because they still exist now. We know that old school, Canon and those kinds of cameras that need to have the regular developing with the stop bath and all that kind of shit that we learned, or at least I learned in school. But this was just before, this movie was made just before everybody had a cell phone. And everybody not only had a cell phone, but they had a camera on their phone, which was going to at least be a reasonable facsimile of pictures that you would get from a Polaroid or a Konica or a Canon. And Robin in that film, I won't spoil it, I'm not going to say anything other than he is riveting, and you just don't have any idea what the deal is with this Cy, the photo guy. Because he's like a photo guy at a Walmart type store, and everybody likes him. And there's this one family that maybe Cy, the photo guy, likes a little bit too much, and then the story goes from there. But Robin Williams was not just a film actor, and then in his later era, towards the end, a TV star. And she's back in the news because her husband, Sarah Michelle Gellar, I'm talking about, is back in the news because Freddie Prinze Jr., big role in the new I Know What You Did Last Summer film. And Sarah Michelle Gellar, I don't think she's in that movie. I know she was in Scream 2. I'm not a fan of most of the kind of teen horror films of the 90s. I know I'm supposed to be as a Gen Xer, but most of them left me cold. Scream 2, Scream 3, they were okay. But Sarah Michelle Gellar worked with Robin Williams in a TV series. That's why I brought her up. I was thinking of her husband, Freddie Prinze Jr. They were on a TV show called The Crazy Ones, and it didn't quite connect with audiences, but not for lack of effort. The two of them, they play father and daughter on the show. And it's a bit of a cliche to say that Sarah Michelle Gellar has done nothing but heap praise on Robin Williams every time she can. She has made a lot of posts focusing on him over the years and how much she felt she learned from him and what a generous performer he was. He didn't make it seem as if, oh, I shouldn't be doing TV, because there was a time, actually decades, where people who had previously been movie stars who had to go to TV, quote unquote, they felt it was beneath them. You don't get that anymore, especially now with streaming just going through the roof. But she said that Robin was so great to work with, and he was so kind to the staff. He never big upped anybody. And I don't know, I like reading, if it's someone who I hold in high esteem, I certainly would rather read, Sarah Michelle Gellar talking about what a wonderful guy he was, rather than, truth be told, he was a terrible person. It's better when somebody's public persona, how we perceive them, seems to be close to the truth. I don't know, I like that. But Robin was not just a film actor or a sketch comic. He was a groundbreaking stand-up, and not in the manner of a Lenny Bruce or a George Carlin, the 7 words you can't say on TV, where George Carlin was breaking all kinds of rules of decorum as Lenny Bruce had. I got to tell you, Carlin was a genius. Lenny Bruce was a trailblazer, but I don't think he was that funny. I've seen Lenny Bruce's stand-up. I just don't think the guy was that funny. Whereas prime George Carlin, man, he hit so many sacred cows 50 and more years ago that you watch now, you say, how did he get away with this? Well, he didn't. He didn't get away with it, but he did it anyway, because he knew there were certain people, certain areas, well, he wasn't going to get arrested for saying this. And then when HBO, it seems crazy to thank cable television, which is now a somewhat antiquated concept, such as it is, but the advent of HBO in the mid-70s made it legal to curse on television. As wacky as that is, there was no more 7 words you couldn't say on TV, because HBO, they were operating, they had different rules and regulations, and suddenly you were able to say, as Robert Klein, my dad's old buddy from junior high school, would say, Robert Klein, first guy on TV to legally say the word shit. What a catharsis. That was Klein's joke. He said, yeah, boy, I was really classy. Like, you could say what you want. And so I go on TV and I go, shit, fuck. Oh my God, what a catharsis. But Robin did different things with his stand-up. He engaged with the audience in a manner that no other comic, as his old friend Billy Crystal said, no comedian ever left the stage before Robin. It wasn't done. It was considered, you can't do that. You can't run out into the audience. Yeah, Andy Kaufman had done it in the same time frame, but as the real Andy Kaufman would say, he wasn't really a comedian. He was a performance artist. I'm a song and dance man. Of course I'm going to go out into the audience. But Robin's talent, he had that magic where when people saw him for the first time, they probably didn't know what to make of him. Also similar to Jim Carrey, his first appearance with Carson in '84 to promote a show which a lot of people liked, it didn't catch on, called Duck Factory. But when somebody makes their first entry into the public consciousness, if they're that talented, if they're doing something different than what we are used to seeing, it takes a little bit. And I can imagine the first people seeing Robin Williams stand up, the manic energy, throwing that on this guy. What the fuck is wrong with this kid? What is he doing up there? But people were interested. And TV scouts saw his act. And when someone appears to have that much talent, you're more willing to take a risk. Because it's not like, well, we'll have to shoehorn him in. No, this guy is different, and we're going to figure out how to utilize his talents. How can we best take advantage of this guy's magic? And so he was cast in a TV series, it ended up being a significant hit because of him, Mork and Mindy, about a space alien who looks like a human, who meets an Earth woman, and, madcap antics, as I like to say, ensue. Now, Mork and Mindy was not really a great sitcom. It was not great television, but this was a major talent. And it was just a matter of time before he would break into movies. He continued to do stand-up. He seemed to really enjoy making people laugh. And eventually, Hollywood came calling. And if you look at his early career, he didn't start off in safe, bland, predictable sorts of films. The World According to Garp, which I think was 1982. That was a huge best-selling novel. I don't remember the name of the author. I think it was the same guy who wrote Prayer for Owen Meany, which became Simon Birch. It was a big author. It's pathetic that I can't remember the name. But The World According to Garp was great literature. It takes into account basically a man's entire life, a guy who lived through certain generations, saw a lot of, social changes and stuff. It's the sort of thing that if they did it now, I mean, you could almost make a TV series about this book. That's how broad it is and was. And the film feels like a comedy for huge chunks of it, but it's not. It's a tragedy with comedic elements, because a lot of really terrible stuff happens in The World According to Garp and in the life of T.S. Garp. That's the character played by Robin. But he was maybe 30 when that movie was shot. He'd already been in the public eye probably 6, 7, 8 years, and he hits every note just right. It's just a phenomenal performance, and there was, a lot of Oscar buzz. It didn't end up happening, but it showed that he could do more than just be a crazy lunatic stand-up or playing this kind of bonkers character of Mork from Mork on the TV series. And to some, I guess, a little bit of a lesser extent, Steve Martin, who was a little older than Robin, about 5 years older than Robin, he was another stand-up who was pioneering and groundbreaking and did stuff on stage and said, throw a net on this fucking guy. This guy is absolutely insane. And Martin's stand-up act translated, and he didn't have a big TV series or anything like that, but Steve Martin began working in film, but he also started in a little bit more of a serious vein with, films such as Pennies from Heaven and All of Me. But Robin's career, if you look at his movie career, the progression. Moscow on the Hudson was a film that a lot of people loved. It got a lot of acclaim. It's a movie that played well then, and takes on a little bit of a different hue now with the geopolitical, what goes on in the world. In that movie, Robin plays a young Russian man who decides that he's going to defect. He wants to live in America. And the idea of, and I'm not making any jokes, the idea of America being a better place to live than Russia, it came up in a number of movies, including The Hunt for Red October, where the entire plot hinges upon a bunch of Russian sub guys deciding, fuck Russia, we want to live in the United States. And the entire story hangs on, is that really true? Or are they going to park their nuclear submarine in New York Harbor and kill us all before going back home? We don't know. But Moscow on the Hudson, although it had some comedic beats, it's not a comedy. It is a very serious exploration of what it would be like. What would it be like? You speak very little of a language in a land where you want to make your life. How would it realistically go? How difficult would it be? And it's a movie that's very difficult. I think it was Paul Mazursky who wrote, I don't know if he wrote that. I'm pretty sure Mazursky directed. I just have that in my head. I want to say that World According to Garp, was it John Irving? Oh, it's just embarrassing. There are certain great authors that I always get mixed up. So like Witches of Eastwick, I know is John Updike, and I know The World According to Garp is not John Updike, but I'm pretty sure John Irving wrote Prayer for Owen Meany. I don't know if he did World According to Garp. I apologize. There's so many great authors that had big, broad, epic kind of novels adapted for film in the 80s, as like The Witches of Eastwick. But I'm trying to remember the first movie I saw with Robin Williams. It may actually have been Moscow on the Hudson, and sorry to say, I became so depressed about an hour in, I don't think I finished the film. My dad read World According to Garp, and he thought the movie was pretty good relative to how great the book was. It was probably in his top 10 favorite novels. He used to talk about it fairly often. Another one of his favorite books, the movie's not so good, Memoirs of an Invisible Man by H.F. Saint. He said that was maybe the most entertaining book he ever read, aside from A Bonfire of the Vanities by Tom Wolfe, which my dad read 3 times. The only fiction book he ever read 3 times. That's how much he loved it. But you move through the 80s and you see that Robin was always looking to challenge himself and to not just make, and there's nothing wrong with just making silly comedies. And I recommend you go see the movie Sullivan's Travels, the film, the Coen brothers' favorite movie, the Preston Sturges film. It's about a filmmaker who only makes silly comedies. He's really good at getting people to laugh, but he wants to do something else. He wants to make a serious film about the plight of the homeless in Depression-era America, and he goes on all kinds of crazy adventures and realizes, you know what? There's something to be said for being able to make people laugh. It's okay if that's your lot in life, that you just happen to be really good at making people laugh. Robin liked to take roles which challenged him, but also balanced what they would call humor and pathos, meaning psychology. So, for example, Barry Levinson, a filmmaker I love, he later did Rain Man, won all the awards. He had done The Natural and Diner. Just a great filmmaker. He did Bugsy in '91, one of the best films of the decade for sure. But Good Morning Vietnam. Robin plays a real life guy, and this is the sort of story nowadays we would know exactly what percentage of this really happened, because he plays a real life DJ working overseas. He was a soldier and he also was a DJ. Adrian Cronauer was the guy's name. And in some circles, it was thought that Robin was actually going to win the Best Actor, not supporting, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that Robin was going to win the Best Actor Oscar, that he gave the best performance by an actor for films released in 1987. He had a couple of big hitters. Marcello Mastroianni, he wasn't going to win for a movie called Dark Eyes, where I think he plays a gigolo. But Michael Douglas in Wall Street, it was his award. And if we're being honest, that was the best performance that Douglas ever gave. And Douglas was a great actor. Michael Douglas had a hell of an 87, because he had Wall Street and Fatal Attraction both come out right around the same time. And he gives very distinctive performances in one one versus the other. But I think about how many really good movies Robin Williams made in his career. And there are certain films that are a lot of fun that aren't necessarily that good. He did the film with Kurt Russell called The Best of Times in '86 when Kurt was still on the rise. Kurt Russell is an interesting case in the sense that he was a child star. He was Walt Disney's favorite star, for real. And Kurt Russell, his career just kept going up. He just kept rising and rising and rising. He was the child star. And then when he made the kind of turn to more adult roles, The Thing, he just kept going up. And I always thought that Robin Williams and Kurt Russell, they were fucking hilarious on screen together in that film. Did a movie called Club Paradise, not that good. But he was willing to take risks and take chances. And as he put it, he didn't like to dwell on failures, on movies where the idea seemed better than the execution. And I remember, and he talked about this film a number of times. He did a movie my dad also was a big fan of called Cadillac Man with Tim Robbins. The same year that Tim did Jacob's Ladder, one of my favorite horror films for sure. Robin plays a car salesman in Cadillac Man. And he told a story how he was on a plane sometime in 1991, and he was on a plane. And they just happened to be, I think that he probably made this story up, but he said he was on a plane and they just happened to be showing Cadillac Man. He said, and the movie it wasn't going over well with the people on the plane. And he said, and I just started to shrink in my seat, and he was doing like all of the facial expressions and stuff, like looking around. But he said, I don't make mistakes. I don't make bad movies. I make interesting choices. That's how I looked at Cadillac Man. It was an interesting choice. Maybe it didn't work out the way that Tim and I, the way that we really thought that it might, but it was an interesting choice. And I would agree with that. You want it to be a different movie than it is, because it seems to be setting up a sales contest, a la, speaking of Kurt Russell, Used Cars, the Robert Zemeckis film from 1980, and then it turns into a hostage story. What the fuck are we doing here? It was an interesting choice. But if I'm asked the question, what is my favorite Robin Williams performance? I remember he won an Oscar for supporting actor for Good Will Hunting. I mean, Good Will Hunting is a really solid film. Slightly overrated, if I'm asked. It's slightly, just ever so slightly overrated. My favorite performance by Robin Williams and my favorite movie with Robin Williams is Terry Gilliam's The Fisher King, which is also the single best screenplay I've ever read, with the exception of Bruce Joel Rubin's aforementioned Jacob's Ladder. The Fisher King is the character that Robin plays, I'd like to think, is probably the closest approximation to how he was in real life. Because one thing that I didn't know, and this kinds of things weren't reported, Robin Williams struggled with depression for most of his life. It's a cliche to say that a lot of really funny people, the humor comes from pain. But it seems to be the case. And in The Fisher King, which came out in 1991, and Robin also had a bigger role than was advertised in another movie from 91 called Dead Again. And I think he was nominated the previous year in Awakenings, Penny Marshall's film, it features one of De Niro's, hands down, one of his 5 best performances. And in that case, it's not so much the range, but that De Niro believably is able to play physical manifestations of a disease and just do it brilliantly and heartbreakingly, if I may say. But The Fisher King, the character that Robin plays, he plays a guy who goes by Parry. And we don't really know what his name is for most of the movie. We just think that he's a sort of a very quirky, intelligent, homeless guy. And Jeff Bridges plays a disc jockey, supposed to be like a Howard Stern, but 35-year-ago version of Howard Stern. Somebody who was a shock jock, who was not afraid to piss off his listeners, people who call into his radio show. But in the world of that film, he pisses off the wrong guy, and a terrible action takes place, and Jeff Bridges loses his job, and he's laid low, and he meets this homeless guy played by Robin, who goes by Parry. His name is not really Parry. It's supposed to be Parsifal, and the story is basically like a King Arthur kind of story, searching for the Holy Grail, and the character that Robin plays is someone who has the highs and lows of a person who is probably schizophrenic. Well, in the world of the movie, we're led to believe that Parry that he has suffered a psychotic break at some point would be more accurate. It's not just that he might be a manic depressive with incredible highs and then he suddenly is suicidal. There are elements of that. But the idea of someone who has absorbed so much psychological pain that there are times where you feel like they can't continue. They can't get out of bed today. And unfortunately, when Robin passed, there were people in Hollywood, most of whom didn't want to put a name to it, but that they said, we saw him when he was at his lowest point. We saw there were days where it was very difficult for him to put on a brave face. And yeah, I got to go to work. I can't call in sick today or whatever it might be. And Fisher King is a really beautiful story of redemption and coming to terms with the occasional unfair horrors of everyday life. It's really an amazing movie. And obviously, Gen Xers, we remember him doing the voice from the animated Aladdin. And he really was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood through the 90s, really until the early 2000s. Some of the movies, like, I don't think Mrs. Doubtfire is that good of a movie. That was an enormous box office hit. It made over 200 million now more than 3 decades ago. Okay, it's okay, you know? And I saw Jumanji in theaters. That's the only Robin Williams movie I believe I saw on opening day was the 1995 version of Jumanji. It's okay. I give it 2.5 stars out of 4. The problem I had with that movie is the fact that Robin's character is a tragic character. And the audience kept wanting him to do funny Robin Williams stuff. Also, there were a lot of little kids in the theater. I saw it. I was 21. That's not a movie for little kids. The Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart Jumanji is more suitable for, children under 12, let's say. The 1995 Jumanji, I think, was rated PG-13. It gets into some pretty heavy psychological shit with the father and the son. No, thank you. I remember I'm looking, I don't think, and the Newsday Review at the time said there are going to be parents taking their small kids who are familiar with the story, and they're not going to be happy with the level of shit that goes on in this movie. He didn't say the level of shit, but that was the idea. This is not a movie for 3-year-olds by any stretch. But then again, I remember seeing Jurassic Park the weekend it opened, and there were little 3, 4, 5-year-old kids who were scared shitless. The T-Rex attacked, kids are screaming. You got to be more careful. But with that being said, there are a lot of Robin Williams movies which are very popular, especially among, young boomers and Gen Xers, which I just don't like. I think Patch Adams is terrible. That was another big box office hit. I thought that film was terrible. And I agreed with Roger Ebert. He said this film was atrocious. I wouldn't go that far. I thought Patch Adams was like 2 stars out of 4. But Robin still, he was always trying to do something off the beaten path. The late 90s when he did What Dreams May Come with Vincent Ward. That's a movie that I think is underrated. Incredible visuals, just a gorgeous movie to look at. And the kind of, if you want to call it a doom romance between the 2 leads, which was Robin Williams and Annabella Sciorra's characters. Really, really well done. Tug at the heartstrings, kind of movie. But I was really happy when Robin won the Oscar. I would say the 98 Oscars were my second favorite Oscars as far as the experience of watching. My favorite was the 93 Oscars because that's when Clint Eastwood won Best Picture and Best Director for Unforgiven, and Gene Hackman won for supporting actor, also for Unforgiven. But the 98 Oscars, even if I didn't think that Good Will Hunting was quite worthy of the unbelievable levels of praise, I think Coppola's The Rainmaker with Matt Damon, I think that's a better movie. I think that The Rainmaker is just phenomenal. It got really good reviews, but I feel like maybe because it was Coppola, they were expecting another Godfather. That's a problem with being Francis Coppola. You put out a movie like that, it's a return to form. Everything is always a return to form. Coppola's previous movie starred Robin Williams. It was called Jack, and it's not as bad as its reputation. It's not good, as Bill Cosby plays a doctor in that movie. It's a little difficult seeing Cosby screwing around, no pun intended, in there. But it was great to see Robin win an Oscar. And then Billy Crystal, who was the host, made a joke about it. He says, man, having a tough night. My best friend just won an Oscar, and I'm not going to hear the end of it for the rest of our lives. And everybody's laughing. I hope that it really wasn't that bad. I think that Billy was sort of overstating the case. But that brings me to what I wanted to close on, which is the humanitarian efforts. That Robin Williams was not just a movie star. And there's a meme that's circulated. Nobody knows exactly how true it was, that supposedly on many film sets, Robin asked to hire as many people who were homeless or indigent and kind of put them on the payroll if they were in the area during production. I don't know that that was necessarily true. That may have been a little bit of an apocryphal thing, but his commitment to trying to raise money for the less fortunate, that's 100% true. Comic Relief on HBO, which was spearheaded by Billy Crystal, Whoopi Goldberg. I know she's also controversial, but Whoopi was part of it, and Robin Williams. The three of them were the linchpins of Comic Relief, which was putting comedy shows on HBO live and having people manning the phones and collecting donations and donating to worthwhile charities. And it made him happy. It gave him a certain contentment and peace to know that he at least tried. He tried to do right by others. And, one of his last roles was, I forgot which one, but one of the Night at the Museum movies with Ben Stiller. And there was a short on social media a couple of weeks ago where they were saying, did Robin know that he was in his last days here? Because if you just isolate what he says to Ben Stiller about getting the most out of life, he may have been telling people, you only got one shot at this. Or as Robin said, not in the movie, you only get one little spark of magic in life. Don't lose it. And it's just really sad that he isn't here to celebrate his 74th birthday. And I also have to mention his longtime best friend, Christopher Reeve, one of my favorite people who ever worked in the movie business. It is incredible to think that Christopher Reeve has been gone almost 21 years. And in the Christopher Reeve documentary, Robin Williams is a very important player in that documentary. And friends of both of them, such as Glenn Close, talk about the unshakable bond they had. And that Robin, there's no question that Christopher Reeve lived longer than he otherwise would have, because Robin was always visiting and spending time with him and making him laugh and making him feel like he was still vibrant and vital and an essential person, even if he was confined to a wheelchair for the rest of his life, even if he was a quadriplegic. The world was a better place with Christopher Reeve in it. Just so gutting. It really hurts that they're both gone. In the case of Reeve, 21 years. Christopher Reeve was only 51 when he passed. He was only 42 when he suffered that riding injury. But Robin was, 61 when he passed? 62? It's tragic. There's no way around it. He went way before his time. But he left an incredible legacy of laughter and spreading warmth and good cheer and just being an all-around humanitarian, somebody he was more about other people than himself. Happy 74th birthday in memory of Oscar winner Robin Williams. This has been episode 586 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Monday afternoon here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.